Hi, everyone, and welcome to our check-in for today, our community check-in. I'm actually calling this our mental health check-in because what we're going to do is a little bit different than what we've been doing over the last little while. And so I'm not going to say too much today. Usually I yammer on for way too long when I do these check-ins. But today we have a special guest with us that's going to be helping us through this topic around mental health and the pandemic. So it's a beautiful day outside. So I really appreciate Susan taking some time away from the nice weather to be with us. First time in double digits temperatures since I think mid-December. So this is cause for celebration today. Like everybody should be out on their deck this evening, barbecue, blazed up, and a drink of some sort, whether it's beer or wine or whatever, floats your boat. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say. I just want to welcome Susan Green and give Susan an opportunity to say a little bit about herself, her qualifications, just so everybody knows she's not some schmo off the street who's just talking about something she doesn't know anything about. So Susan, thank you for so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And right now, hopefully, we won't get interrupted, but apologies in advance if there's a burst of children in here in about 10 or 15 minutes. I'll try my best to contain the noise. So, thank you for inviting me. I'm Susan Green. I'm a social worker. I work as a mental health counselor at Her Majesty's Penitentiary. In my job right now, what I do mostly is addictions counseling, which, as many of us know, is a mental health issue. So, yeah, that's my background. Also, I teach a course from the Mental Health Commission of Canada called Mental Health First Aid. So, I think that's how people from your parish might have known me. So yeah, that's a little bit about a little blurb. So I'm not any schmo from the street, or I might be a schmo from the street, and all of those things also.
Oh, no, you're not a schmo at all. Actually, Susan led a mental health first aid course here at St. Mark's for some clergy and then some other parish lay leaders. So that was fantastic. And I'm sure some of that stuff will come up here today. And for those of you who are wondering, she's a good Anglican,
I am that.
member of the cathedral parish, very involved down there. So we're all good. You got all bases covered today.
Oh, and I'm a preacher's kid.
And a preacher's kid. Oh my God, you are qualified.
I'm
You
so
might be you might be overqualified.
totally overqualified.
Okay, so let's get right to it. So what we're going to do, I just have a few questions for Susan, and then if we have time at the end, we will. I'm keeping track of things here to make sure if there's any questions that we can get to one or two of them. We have a limited time, so we probably won't get to too many. But people can leave comments, and Susan, if you don't mind going back later on, maybe if there's some questions that you could maybe answer in the comment section, if that's okay with you, if we run out of time.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the first question is really which cuts to the chase of what we're here to talk about. And everybody knows that this pandemic and the social distancing is really having an impact on people's mental health. So what can we do to care for our mental health in this pandemic crisis that we find ourselves in?
Sure. I think that the most important thing to remember right now, at this point in the pandemic, is that it is okay to be wherever you are in terms of your mental health. So I've spoken to some people who are actually doing okay and feeling right now that they are managing things. There's been some stress, some anxiety, but generally their mental health is okay. And sometimes people think, oh, what's wrong with me that I'm not feeling this? Or that I seem to be happy right now. What does that mean about my life pre-pandemic? So it's about not judging yourself. If you're feeling mentally well, then that's okay. It could be that the longer this goes on, or when we eventually go back to whatever normal is, people might experience some anxiety. But for now, if you're feeling pretty good mentally, that's okay. And it's also okay to not be doing so well right now, you know? For many of us, we've lost what forms our daily lives. So we've lost the structure of our work. For people that are home, that work from home, or are stay at home parents, They've now had everybody in their space, so their daily life has changed. We can't see our friends and family. We can't go to our places of worship. We can't do the things that we love, like go to restaurants or go to bars or sporting events or even a walk in our favorite park. So this is challenging for people. So if you are having difficulty with your mental health, then that's okay, right? That's understandable. Um, so yeah, just sort of being okay with wherever you are, and also anticipating that that might change because everything is changing day to day. So trying to be open and compassionate with yourself around that. If I were to give some tips about how to take care of your mental health, because I understand that is the question. One of the first things I would say is to try to maintain some sort of new daily routine. It doesn't have to be rigid or overly structured. You don't need to beat up on yourself if you spend a day in your pajamas or two. But it is good, I think, to create some sense of normal routine. So that might be getting showered and getting dressed in the mornings, um, sitting at your table for a meal instead of eating while on the computer or watching TV, going for a daily walk. Sometimes it's helpful to have a set time, maybe first thing in the morning or lunchtime, to go for a daily walk. Having set times to check things like news or email or social media, having those kind of structures put into place so that there's some sense of routine to your day. I think that's a good place to start. Um, Staying connected with people is important. For me, I don't necessarily recharge my batteries by being with people. So I'm what many people would call an introvert in some ways, although I can be extroverted in other ways. But I feel myself sometimes swamped when I'm on social media too much or Facebook Messenger. I know a lot of my friends are doing things through Zoom or FaceTime or this new thing called House Party. I find those things a bit overwhelming and I don't necessarily connect well with people that way. But I do think it's important to stay connected, whether that's by phone or if you are someone who enjoys those types of virtual meetings, that's great. Just being aware that some people need more social connection than others. If you have one or two people that you connect with on a regular basis, I think that's important. Some people need more, some people need less. But I think we all need to stay connected somehow, even if it's just through one or two people. I think, Robert, you had mentioned how beautiful it is outside. I think getting outside is really good for our mental health right now. Understanding the connection between our physical bodies and our mental health. So I know there's a lot of comfort food going around. I know there's a lot of people baking bread and eating chips, and that's cool. Just remember that you want to eat how you want to feel. So I think healthy food, if you're able to be physically active, that's great. If you're able to get outdoors, that's even better. I think that's a really important piece of our mental health right now. Um, Paying attention to how much social media I think that you consume or how much news you consume. Myself, I prefer Canadian news. If I have CNN on in the house, I will become anxious. So just paying attention to how much news, and that's when I talk about structure. Sometimes it's important, I think, to have some routine to. I'll check my news and my social media at these times during the day. So just being aware that you don't get a constant barrage. We need to be informed. We don't need to be swamped.
Yeah, one of the things I totally relate to that because
Yeah.
so much of what I do now as a parish priest has moved online.
Oh,
And so I'm finding that my screen time has doubled or tripled because so much of what I do now is in this format. And so what I've had to do in the last couple of weeks is to find a day, and what works for me right now is Saturdays. So Saturdays for me is, as much as I can, a screen Sabbath. So I try not to, be checking Facebook, Twitter, that kind of stuff. No Zoom meetings or anything like that, if at all possible. If there is going to be some screen time, it's just with like a really close friend or a family member. I've been fortunate enough that all my immediate family is all under one roof. So, but I find the social media stuff really draining,
Yes.
really
Yeah.
taxing on my own mental health.
And it can be taxing also, I think, because so much with social media uh, is about comparison. So for me, I think as a parent of three young kids, if I'm on social media too much, I'm feeling like a failure with my kids. Like, I'm sorry, I haven't baked bread with them yet. I'm not teaching them wild and wonderful life skills every day. I'm, mucking up the homeschooling sometimes. So sometimes the social media can actually add to our anxiety. It's a double-edged sword because right now, like Zoom and FaceTime, they can be lifelines for us too. So we don't necessarily have to cut them out. It'd be really hard to cut them out right now. But I think we just need to be careful with, like you're talking about, like how much of this we take in.
Because there's so much pressure. Like people. I saw a meme not too long ago. Like, if you come out of this, with not having your life in order, it's your own fault. And I'm like,
Yes.
just relax. It's a global pandemic, for God's sake. Let
Yeah.
people just be, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to write a novel during this period. You don't have to, come up with some big invention or totally change your life around. It's okay to
Learn
just,
a new, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
just be, right? Yeah.
It's okay to just be. And I think that I read something very similar too on Facebook a few days ago about how your children are going to remember this for the rest of their
Oh
lives.
my God.
Are you going to create fabulous memories for them now during this pandemic? Are you going to scar them for life because of your own mental health? This is the kinds of things that can cause anxiety for us. So just being aware of that and taking that with a grain and not taking too much of that in.
Hmm. Hmm. So are we okay to move on to the next question, or was there anything else you wanted to
Yeah,
hit?
I could impart so much, couldn't I? But I think I've run out on that question.
So the other question is, so it's one thing to be aware of our own mental health, and take care of ourselves in a difficult time like this, but I think it's also important to be aware, to be conscious of others, and whether this is people you live with under the same roof, or friends, family members, acquaintances, coworkers. How can we be aware of, see signs in other people that may be struggling in a time like this, especially if it's someone who had maybe, like, say, pre-existing mental health issues, whether it's depression, anxiety, bipolar, whatever it is. Uh, what signs should we be able to look for? And then what are some things we can do to reach out and help people, and to get beyond the "how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, great, I'm fine too." And then just because we tend to spend a lot of time at that surface level, how can we go a little bit deeper there?
Yes. And I think some of the things that we want to be aware of apply to our own mental health as well as the mental health of the people that we care about. So, one of the things we need to understand is that taking care of our mental health is important for people who are diagnosed with a specific mental illness and for people who are not diagnosed with a specific mental illness. So, all of us have mental health. All of us need to be aware of our mental health. I could be diagnosed with a mental illness and be experiencing good mental health right now. I could be not diagnosed with a mental illness, but experiencing very poor mental health right now. So the signs and symptoms that someone might be struggling with a mental health issue are the same. Some of the things I think that people need to look out for in terms of their own mental health right now, whether or not they need to seek professional help right now or seek out somebody to speak to, a peer, um, are things like um, some of the signs would be: am I sleeping too much? Am I sleeping too little? Are there significant changes in my appetite? Eating too much, eating too little? Am I avoiding people, not answering the phone, not returning texts, spending a lot of time in bed? Um, Having a lack of energy that impacts daily living, such as changes in hygiene, changes in sleep patterns, um, being unable to do things at home that you would normally be able to do, such as not having the energy to cook or do laundry or do the cleaning, things that are actually significantly impacting your day to day living. In terms of emotions that I would like people to be aware of for themselves or for someone else they care about, keep an eye out to see if you or someone else is very irritated lately or easily angered or frustrated. Finding a lack of enjoyment in activities that you would normally enjoy. Like I used to enjoy hiking or walking, but I don't have that anymore. I don't enjoy that anymore. um, Feelings of despair or hopelessness, um, excessive anxiety about the future, persistent, excessive feelings of panic or anxiety coming to your mind that interrupt your daily living. Being aware of consumption of alcohol or the use of drugs to make difficult feelings go away. Those types of things might be an indication that you or the person that you care about is struggling significantly right now with their mental health. So, a lot of us are feeling more anxious than normal, and a lot of us are feeling sad. But if it seems to be persistent and impacting a person's day to day functioning, it might be time to seek out help. After our interview, I can share with you, Robert, some resources, rather than me giving the blurb right now. But there's a lot of great phone and local resources and national resources where people can go to get help. Rather than take up the time to talk about that, I can just leave that with you to share with your parishioners afterwards. But one of the things I think that I'd like people to do that we can all do for one another right now, apart from being compassionate with ourselves right now, which is what we need to be tuned in and compassionate with ourselves. One of the key steps, and you would remember this perhaps from mental health first aid, is called non judgmental listening. And I can't give a 2 day course in 2 minutes. But if I were to highlight one of the things that I would encourage people to use from mental health first aid, it would be that. It would be finding the time and the space to actually listen to one another. And listening sounds easy. It sounds like something we always do and we're all so good at it. But we're not sometimes. Non judgmental listening means putting aside temporarily or permanently our attitudes and ideas about what a person should be feeling, what a person should be doing right now, and just putting that aside and really listening to a person's experiences and their emotions. And sometimes that means zipping it and saying less, and just encouraging the person and saying things like, that must be really hard. Or, thanks for trusting me with that. Thanks for sharing that with me. Oftentimes, when we hear somebody talk about a difficult feeling or difficult experience or where they are right now, it makes us feel uncomfortable and we want that to go away or we want to fix it for the person. What I'm asking people to do with non judgmental listening is to hold back on that and just give the person that you're listening to the time and the quiet space to share. Not jumping in to solve the problem, not trying to cheer the person up, not reminding them of all the things that they have that they're grateful for, or that they should be grateful for. Just simply sitting and listening to the person and letting them share what's going on for them. That's the best thing I think that we can do. Compassion for ourselves compassion and non-judgmental listening for the other person.
And I guess the challenge right now, because when I hear you say that, what I hear is, being present
Yep.
with people. And the challenge, though, is that the presence is different now because it's often not going to be face to face in the same room. But that doesn't mean that you can't be present with
Exactly.
people,
Yeah.
right? You just have to come up with a new way.
Yeah. And acknowledging that that is hard.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that, you know what, I would really like to be with you right now. I would like to be there face to face to share this moment with you, to be able to listen to you face to face. So acknowledging that this is tough. This
Yeah.
is tough to not be with one another. And it does, for some people, they do really good talking on the phone or online like this. For some of us, we really miss that physical presence of another person. So acknowledging that.
Yeah. Before we get into some questions from people, if people have
Mhm,
questions, you mentioned earlier about your children, right?
mhm,
So, is there anything you could say just really briefly about, what about children in particular? Because we are living in a time when there is already, increased issues around mental health, with children, and I would assume that this is only adding to some
mhm.
of those issues. So, is there anything specifically for those who may be watching live or going to watch this afterwards who may have little children or grandchildren? What specifically can we do when it comes to children?
I would say, if we're talking specifically to parents, first and foremost, I think we need to give ourselves that compassion and let ourselves off the hook trying to make this all good and memorable and wonderful and such a good learning experience for our children. I think there's a lot of pressure on parents. And if parents are feeling that pressure and that stress, the kids are going to be feeling that too. So letting ourselves off the hook a little, that this is not going to go perfect all the time and not every day is going to be a good day. And I'm not going to be the star parent. I'm going to be mediocre most days, and I'm okay with being mediocre. So, first and foremost, parents need to be able to be compassionate and take care of themselves. Secondly, I would say that the reason we talk about mental health first aid as being a course for youth and adults is because children communicate very differently. And so when I talk about listening to one another and having those conversations and non judgmental listening, that's effective with children too. However, children don't sit and have those conversations about their feelings the way that adults do. Oftentimes, their feelings and experiences come out in terms of behavior. You may see some more difficult behaviors. You may see psychosomatic kind of complaints like I have a headache or my tummy hurts and those types of things. Sometimes that is a physical experience, and sometimes it's also a mental health experience for them. So, being aware that sometimes the signs and symptoms that a child is feeling mentally unwell right now are very different than what you would see in an adult because they don't communicate it the same. I'm going to give you an example of my daughter, who's 9 years old. And Brenda, my partner, and I have been marveling at how happy our children seem to be over the last several weeks because we were expecting them to be a lot more difficult and challenging. And last week, we had a light up Frosty the Snowman out on our front lawn that had been covered during Snowmageddon and finally appeared on our lawn last week. And I'm sick of this Frosty. I wanted to get rid of him. I don't like it anymore. It gets on my nerves. So I listed it on Marketplace and I gave it away for free. Just whoever wants to come and get this off my lawn, just take it away. Brenda called me at work and said, Lily is having a meltdown. She was so upset about Frosty being taken off our lawn. Now, she had forgotten that Frosty was there. She has never really been connected to this light up Frosty the Snowman, but she was so sad. I came home and she was crying and she said, first, it was our cat Chloe. Our cat Chloe died on the first day of these pandemic restrictions. First, our cat. then our school, then our friends, and now Frosty is gone. And so sometimes our children are holding things in, and we're not seeing that. So finding time, even if you're not seeing that with your children, if you're not seeing signs and symptoms that they're distressed, finding times just to check in with them to say, what's it like for you right now to not see your friends? What's it like for you right now to be doing math homework with me, frustrated? And finding those times to have conversations, because children sometimes don't um, show us themselves until Frosty is taken off the lawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you. That's really good. So we were going to take some questions, and I know our time is quickly disappearing. So if anybody who's watching live here now has a question that you can quickly put in the comment section, we might be able to get to it. We might not. I did have someone who sent me a question because she wasn't going to be viewing online live today, but she thought this was an important question, and I think it's an important question too. She was concerned about people who may live alone. And so, the challenges that they might face, and especially now as we enter the double bubble phase of the pandemic, and adding to the isolation now might be some feelings of being left out or looked over in terms of people extending their bubble. So is there anything you can say to that specific situation?
Sure. I think the doubling our bubble, I mean, people have become very excited about that, and I understand that. And in fact, my initial reaction last night, or yesterday afternoon when I heard about the double bubble, was excitement. Oh, wow, we can invite somebody into our bubble. And that's exciting. And imagine being able to have somebody else in our house again, or be able to sit down and have a meal with someone again. How wonderful. But it's not wonderful for everybody. And in fact, for some people, it's added a new element of anxiety. I was speaking with a parent earlier today who described the experience of inviting a family that they know into their bubble. It felt like a proposal, like, will you join my bubble? And they were turned down and said, sorry, we already have someone in our bubble, another family with children. Um, and her feelings around that were really, she felt very rejected. And so, and I think that's an example of a parent. I think that for people whose bubble is really small right now, people who live alone perhaps, they're more likely to experience that, because people, if you're going to ask someone to join your bubble, you might want the biggest bang for your buck. So you're going to go with a bigger bubble and not a small bubble of one or two people. So the double bubble has added a vulnerability, I think, for people. And perhaps for people whose bubble is not going to double, they might feel even more lonely. So that's a tough one for small bubbles and for single folks, people that live alone. Again, a lot of the advice that I would give will be the advice that I gave before. Finding someone, at even one or two people to connect with. I know it's difficult connecting this way on Zoom or by phone, but finding at least one or two people that you can share time with. I said earlier that I would share some resources with you. One of the things that's happening in mental health locally is that there's a bunch of Zoom meetings for mental health for people who are experiencing mental health difficulties. And a lot of the people we're finding that are joining those Zoom meetings, and there's different ones that I can share with you later, are people that live alone and are finding ways to connect. Um, and there's some interesting stuff coming from that, because one of the people that I spoke to last week now are going on meetings internationally, support groups internationally, and they've found new people to connect with. Who are living with different mental health difficulties. So it's opened up a whole new world for some people, but also acknowledging that it is not the same as being in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something else that came in my mind when you were talking about the people who live alone, and now with the expansion of the bubble into the double bubble, is this could be another place where people may have um, to be careful of the amount of social media that they're taking in, because if you're at home alone and feeling isolated, and all of a sudden your news feed is flooded with family reunions and family get-togethers of people, joining their bubbles together, that can add to your own anxiety and feelings of isolation. So you may want to just, you know, um, temper how much of that stuff you're taking in.
Absolutely. And step back from some of that for a little bit. For myself personally, I have not gone into Facebook today because I can't handle that today. My bubble has not doubled, and I'm struggling with whether or not we will, or if our proposals to double with someone will be rejected. So yeah, I think that's good advice sometimes. The other thing that I would suggest is that depending on the neighborhood that you live in, I know that we have some really neat neighboring things going on in our neighborhood right now. And some of those things are really helping the people in our neighborhood that live alone. So there's a lot of people. Um, that walk around this neighborhood now and say hello to people at a physical distance, and there's this whole movement around neighboring. You can go online to get resources around that. But I've heard from some people who live alone that the efforts around what they're calling neighboring right now have been really helpful. So it can be as simple as a neighbor who lives alone that would like something dropped off to them, or a hello from the street as a check-in. There's some really neat social distancing neighboring things happening.
It's also a great opportunity for the church, right?
Hmm.
To really step up and expand our sense of community beyond the building here. I know a lot of people have said they can't wait to get back to church to be able to reconnect with people, but there's no reason why we can't connect with people now. Again, just in a different kind of way, the power of picking up the telephone and phoning someone. And I've seen it happening here at St. Mark's, where people, I've said this a number of times, people have reached out to me to say, you know, I go to the 10:30 service and I sit in this place and there's so and so sits next to me. I don't know their name, but I'm concerned about them.
Yeah.
And I know, okay, that's so and so, and I give them their number. So that kind of stuff is really powerful at a time like this, right? There's a great opportunity for the church to really, we talk a lot about mission.
Hmm.
This is really where the rubber hits the road.
It is, and some of that is really exciting stuff that's going to shape our future.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
The Anglican Cathedral on the days before Good Friday did a curbside pickup of hot cross buns and these resurrection eggs for the children. And it was a really neat way to connect, even just briefly,
Mhm.
on the curbside with people. So there's opportunities like that that we probably couldn't envision before this.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're at our time limit. You got to get back to your real job.
Your job.
So I just want to say thank you so much, Susan, for being here to do this. Not really seeing any questions, but I know some comments, people saying they find it very informative, and people will come to this after, when it's not live, and I'm sure they'll find it helpful too. I don't want to put you on the spot,
Yeah.
but maybe we could make this into a semi-regular thing that we do, where we just have a dedicated check-in to just, see how people are doing. And I find this is, because this is like it's unfolding, and there's always new challenges. Like we were talking about the double bubble. Now this presents a whole new kind of challenge when it comes to mental health. In a couple of weeks, it could be something different, some new twist, some new turn that opens up a whole bunch of other things. So I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but it would be great if you would come back and have a chat with us again. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I'd love to come back sometime. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone who checked in live. And if you're watching this after the fact, thanks for taking some time. We will share some of those resources that Susan was talking about, that people can avail of if they really feel like they need some extra help. Okay. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Enjoy the lovely weather.
Thank you.